The Suisun Bay Reserve Fleet was not just a collection of ships. It was a museum of forgotten power, a silent, rusting testament to naval history. Hundreds of decommissioned vessels, from World War II transports to Vietnam-era destroyers, sat in long, ordered rows, their hulls covered in rust, their decks choked with weeds, their superstructures reaching like skeletal fingers towards the often foggy California sky. Locals called it the Mothball Fleet, a place where great steel beasts went to die, or perhaps to sleep. For Ben Carter, the night watchman, it was simply his world. For the past 15 years, Ben, a quiet man in his late 50s with a weathered face and eyes that had seen too much, had walked the docks and patrolled the waterways of this aquatic graveyard. A former merchant marine, he found a strange comfort in the silence of the dead ships, the creak of their old steel, the whisper of the wind through their empty bridges. He was a guardian of ghosts, and he preferred their company to most living people. His job was straightforward: prevent vandalism, deter scrap metal thieves, and ensure no environmental hazards escaped the aging vessels. It was lonely work, especially at night, when the fog rolled in from the Pacific, cloaking the ships in a spectral shroud, making them look like a fleet of phantom leviathans waiting to sail into an unseen dawn. He knew every creaking hull, every groaning mooring line, every rhythmic slap of the water against their rusted bellies. He knew the sounds of the fleet. Which was why, a few weeks ago, he started noticing sounds that didn't belong. It began subtly, a faint, almost imperceptible thrum that would hum through the steel docks, a vibration that seemed to come from deep within the water itself, or perhaps from the very metal of the ships. It wasn't a motor or a generator. It was too pure, too harmonic. It would only last a few seconds, then vanish, leaving Ben to wonder if he was just imagining things, a product of too many lonely nights. Then came the lights. Not the navigation lights of passing barges, or the flashlights of his fellow, rarely seen, daytime security team. These lights were different. They were soft, almost bioluminescent, and they moved with an unsettling fluidity between the rows of ships, deep within the tangled maze of the fleet. They weren't bright enough to be seen from afar, but close up, through the fog, they were unmistakable. A pulsating, pale blue or green glow, moving with no discernible source, no visible vessel. They were like jellyfish, but in the heart of a dead steel city. He'd seen them several times now, always late at night, always when the fog was thickest. He tried to follow them once, taking a small patrol boat out, pushing through the murky water towards the source. But the lights always vanished the moment he got too close, dissolving into the impenetrable gray, leaving him alone amidst the towering silent forms of the ghost fleet. Ben was a man of logic and experience. He'd served on ships that had seen things most people only read about. He wasn't prone to flights of fancy. But these lights, they defied explanation. He reported them to his supervisor, a gruff ex-Coast Guard officer named Miller, who simply grunted about swamp gas or some teenagers with LED fishing lures. Ben knew better. This was no swamp gas. This was no fishing lure. Tonight, the fog was particularly heavy, clinging to the ships like a second skin. Ben was making his rounds on foot, the beam of his heavy-duty flashlight cutting a narrow path through the gloom. The air was cold, damp, and smelled of salt, rust, and something else, a faint, almost metallic tang he couldn't place. He heard the thrum again, stronger this time, a deep vibration that resonated in his chest. And then he saw them. A cluster of soft, pulsing blue lights deep within the fleet, clustered around the hull of the USS Kearsarge, a massive, rusted aircraft carrier, its flight deck a skeletal ruin. The lights were moving rhythmically, almost purposefully, as if working. And as Ben watched, transfixed, he saw something else. Figures. Dark, shadowy figures moving amongst the lights, too tall, too slender, too fluid to be human. They weren't just seeing the lights, they were interacting with them. Ben felt a cold knot of fear tighten in his stomach. He was no longer just a watchman guarding dead ships. He was a witness to something impossible. He raised his radio to call Miller, but then hesitated. What would he say? That he was seeing ghosts? Or something worse? He lowered the radio, his hand trembling slightly. This wasn't a job for the official channels. This was a secret, hidden in plain sight. And Ben Carter, for the first time in a long time, felt truly alive. The next few nights, Ben transformed from watchman to hunter. He no longer followed his predictable route. Instead, he found dark, discreet observation posts on the decks of taller ships, armed with a pair of powerful night vision binoculars he'd kept from his merchant marine days. He would sit for hours in the cold, damp darkness, as still as the rusting giants around him, watching. He quickly realized the activity was centered not just around the USS Kearsarge, but beneath it. The light seemed to emanate from under the water near the massive carrier's hull. The figures he had seen were not phantoms. They were real, clad in sleek, dark wetsuits that reflected no light. They moved with an efficiency that spoke of professional training, possibly military. They were divers. But these were no ordinary divers. They used no cumbersome scuba gear. There were no tanks on their backs, and no telltale bubbles rose from the water. They slipped in and out of the bay with an unnatural silence and grace, their movements more like otters than men. They were using small, handheld devices that emitted the soft blue light, which seemed to cut through the rusted metal of the hull without creating sparks or noise. It was a silent, high-tech operation. Ben understood something deeply illegal was happening, but this was nothing like common scrap thieves. They worked with a slow, methodical patience, as if certain they would not be seen or disturbed. They weren't stealing metal from the outside. They were retrieving something from inside the ship, from a section deep below the waterline. One evening, hidden on the bridge of an old destroyer with a clear view of the Kearsarge, Ben witnessed something new. Two of the divers hoisted a large, rectangular object out of the water. It was made of a dark, matte material that seemed to drink the light from his binoculars. The object's surface was covered with complex, faint lines that pulsed with a soft internal light, forming patterns unlike any human technology. The divers, with impossible ease, loaded the seemingly heavy object onto a small, low-profile inflatable boat made of a dark material that was nearly invisible against the black water. Ben realized this wasn't just a team of divers. This was an organized group extracting something of incredible value. But what? And how did it get inside the hull of an old, mothballed aircraft carrier? Then he remembered the old stories, the yarn sailors would spin during long night watches, tales of USOs, unidentified submerged objects, stories of strange sonar pings, of shadows in the deep that moved faster than any submarine. He'd always dismissed them as sea legends, but now, looking at the glowing object in the boat below, he wasn't so sure. Ben knew he needed proof. Reporting this to Miller or the police would be useless. They'd think he was crazy. He needed something concrete. He remembered the old waterproof camera in his locker. It was a risk. To get a picture, he would have to get much, much closer. The next night, with the fog especially thick, Ben lowered his small patrol boat into the water, but he didn't start the engine. He took the oars. Silently, like a ghost, he began to row into the heart of the fleet, towards the rusting giant of the Kearsarge. Every creak of the oarlocks sounded deafening to him. The water felt like a cold wall rising from the massive steel hulls that towered over him on either side. He felt like a small man in a world of sleeping gods, and he was rowing right into their lair, not knowing if they would wake.
Ben rowed with the slow, steady rhythm of a man who knew the water intimately. The small patrol boat cut through the murky, still surface of the bay with barely a ripple. The fog was his shield, a thick, damp curtain that deadened sound and hid him from view. Above him, the colossal, silent forms of the ghost fleet loomed like cliffs in the darkness, their rust-streaked hulls weeping orange tears down to the waterline. He navigated by memory, gliding through the narrow channels between the sleeping giants until the immense, dark wall of the USS Kearsarge filled his vision. He could hear it now, a low, resonant hum that was almost too low to be sound, a vibration that pulsed through the water and up into the hull of his own small boat. He let the boat drift the final few feet, coming to rest in the deep shadow of the carrier's stern, his heart a frantic drum against his ribs. From his position, tucked away and unseen, he had a perfect, terrifyingly close view of the operation. The silent divers were at work. There were 4 of them tonight, moving with an eerie, coordinated grace. The low-profile inflatable boat was tethered to the Kearsarge's hull, and on it sat another of the strange, glowing rectangular artifacts they had extracted. Ben raised his old waterproof camera. It was a relic, a 35mm film camera in a heavy plastic housing, but it was reliable, and, most importantly, it made almost no sound. He braced it against the side of his boat, trying to steady his trembling hands. He needed a clear shot of the object, of the divers, of their impossible tools. As he brought the scene into focus, he saw exactly what they were doing. They weren't cutting into the ship from the outside. They were opening a seam that was already there. Along the waterline, a section of the hull, at least 20 feet long, had been expertly fused with a plate of the same dark, non-reflective material as the objects they were extracting. It was a patch, a scar, but one made with technology far beyond anything Ben had ever seen. The seam was almost invisible, and it was from this hidden door that the divers were emerging. One of the divers was using a handheld device that emitted the soft blue light. He ran it along the edge of the seam, and the massive plate of strange metal seemed to ripple, becoming almost liquid for a moment, allowing the diver to pull another glowing artifact from within the carrier's belly. It was like watching a surgeon pull an organ from a living creature. The ship wasn't just a hiding place. It had been integrated, made part of something else. Then, Ben saw what was inside. As the diver moved the artifact, the opening offered a brief glimpse into the ship's interior. It wasn't the dark, rusted, water-filled compartment of a derelict ship. The inside was glowing with a faint, ambient light, revealing a vast, cavernous space lined with the same smooth, dark material. It was the interior of another vessel, a non-human craft that had been surgically placed, hidden, inside the Trojan horse of the old aircraft carrier. The realization hit him with the force of a physical blow. A USO hadn't just been salvaged, it had been captured, contained, and hidden here, in the most obvious and overlooked place in the world. And these divers weren't thieves. They were salvagers, or perhaps surgeons, carefully dismantling a dead creature to study its secrets. Just as he was about to press the shutter, one of the divers stopped. It lifted its head, a featureless black visor and a sleek helmet, and turned, staring directly into the shadows where Ben's boat was hidden. Ben froze, his finger hovering over the button. He wasn't sure if he had been seen or merely sensed. The diver remained motionless for a long, terrifying moment, a silent black predator in the gloom. The other divers paused their work, turning to look in the same direction. Ben didn't breathe. The silence was absolute, broken only by the gentle lapping of water. He felt a strange pressure building in his head, a faint, probing sensation, like a voice trying to whisper directly into his mind. He squeezed his eyes shut. After an eternity, the lead diver slowly turned back to his work, and the pressure in Ben's mind vanished. He had been scanned, probed, and, for whatever reason, dismissed. His hands shaking uncontrollably now, Ben lowered the camera. He knew with chilling certainty that this was far bigger than he could have imagined. This wasn't just some secret group. This was a conspiracy on a global, perhaps even cosmic scale. And he, a lonely night watchman, had just floated right into the middle of it. He began to slowly, silently paddle backwards, away from the impossible secret of the USS Kearsarge. Ben didn't sleep that night. He spent the remaining hours until dawn in his small, cluttered office on the main dock, the waterproof camera lying on his desk like a ticking bomb. The images of the glowing alien technology, the silent divers, the impossible interior of the Kearsarge, they cycled through his mind with relentless clarity. His world, once predictable and quiet, had fractured. He knew he couldn't go to his supervisor, Miller. Miller was part of the mundane world, a world that dealt with leaky pipes and missing tools, not with alien technology hidden inside mothballed aircraft carriers. And anyway, Ben had felt that probing sensation in his mind. They knew he was there. They knew he saw something. The next morning, his patrol ended. He drove his old Ford pickup truck towards the main gate, his mind racing. He kept glancing in his rearview mirror, a habit he hadn't indulged in since his days in hazardous shipping zones. No one was following him. He breathed a shallow sigh of relief. He still had the film. He still had the proof. His first stop was a small independent photo lab in a strip mall in Martinez, far from the prying eyes of the bay. He handed the camera, asking for the film to be developed and printed. No digital copies, no questions asked. The teenager behind the counter, more interested in his phone, barely looked up. He felt a fleeting sense of security. Later that afternoon, the phone in his small, rented house rang. It was Miller. "Ben, where are you? You didn't show up for the debriefing." "Debriefing? What debriefing?" Ben asked, genuinely confused. "The military debriefing, Ben," Miller practically yelled. "Two guys in suits, asking about, well, they didn't say, but they asked specifically for you. Said you made a report about some lights." Ben's blood ran cold. The probing sensation he'd felt in his mind, the diver's direct stare. They hadn't dismissed him. They had cataloged him. They knew his name. I had a doctor's appointment," Ben stammered, scrambling for a lie. "What did they want?" "They're still here, Ben, waiting. They want to talk to you about unusual activity reports. You better get back here. They don't look like the kind of fellas you want to keep waiting." Ben hung up, his mind a whirlwind. They had moved fast, too fast. He had to assume they had ways of tracking him, of knowing who he was. His small house suddenly felt like a trap. He looked at the developing photos, still wet, spread out on his kitchen table. The images were blurry, grainy but unmistakable. The glowing alien artifact, the silent divers, the impossible interior of the Kearsarge's hull. It was all there, solid, real. He grabbed the stack of photos, stuffing them into an old metal strongbox that he usually kept his important papers in. He couldn't go back to the fleet. He couldn't trust Miller. He couldn't trust anyone. He had to disappear. But where? And what good would these photos do him if he was just another paranoid old man on the run? He thought of his sister in Oregon, a quiet, sensible woman who knew nothing of his strange life. He thought of his old Marine contacts, tough men who had seen things, but nothing like this. He needed to get these photos into the right hands. But whose hands? Just then, he heard a sound from outside. Not a car, a van. A large, dark van with its engine idling quietly on the gravel road leading to his house. It hadn't driven past the house or parked on the street. It had stopped directly in front of his property, out of sight from the main road. The engine cut, plunging the late afternoon into an unsettling silence. Ben pressed himself against the window, peering through the gap in the curtains. He saw it. A black, unmarked van. The side door slid open with a soft hiss, and two figures emerged. They were dressed in dark suits, just as Miller had described. No badges, no insignia. They were moving with a quiet, efficient purpose towards his front door. They weren't here to talk. They were here to silence him. Ben didn't hesitate. He grabbed the strongbox, his old Merchant Marine duffel bag already packed with emergency essentials, and his trusty, heavy-duty flashlight. He knew his property well, every hidden path, every overgrown ditch. There was a back window in his laundry room that led to a dense thicket of blackberry bushes. It was a tight squeeze, but he could make it. As the first, firm knock rattled his front door, Ben was already through the window, pushing his way through the thorns, leaving the quiet predictability of his old life behind him forever. He was no longer just a night watchman. He was a fugitive, and his only cargo was the most dangerous secret on Earth. Ben ran. He scrambled through the dense thicket behind his house, the thorns tearing at his clothes, and didn't stop until he reached the murky marshlands that bordered his property. He moved with a purpose he hadn't felt in 30 years, his adrenaline masking the ache in his aging joints. He knew they would search his house, find it empty, and then begin a systematic hunt. He had maybe a 30-minute lead if he was lucky. He spent the first night hidden in the hollowed-out hull of a beached fishing boat he knew from his youth, miles from his home. The cold and damp seeped into his bones, but he barely noticed. His mind was a frantic landscape of fear and calculation. The strongbox with the photos felt both like a shield and a target. It was the only thing that could prove he wasn't insane, but it was also the very thing that would get him killed. He needed to contact someone who operated outside the official channels, someone who was already looking for shadows. He thought back to the long, lonely nights in his guard shack, listening to late-night talk radio. There was one host, a man named Alistair Finch, whose syndicated show, The Midnight Broadcast, was a haven for conspiracy theorists, whistleblowers, and tellers of strange tales. Finch was often ridiculed, but he had a vast network of listeners and sources. More importantly, he was paranoid enough to believe a story like Ben's. The next day, Ben made his way to a small, grimy truck stop. He bought a cheap, untraceable burner phone with cash. He knew calling the show directly was a risk. The lines could be monitored. But Finch often gave out a secondary encrypted email address for sensitive tips. Ben found an old, dusty computer in a corner of the truck stop's diner, paid for 30 minutes of slow dial-up internet, and composed his message. His hands shook as he typed. He kept the message short and cryptic. Subject: the cargo of the Ghost Fleet. Body: I have proof. Photographic evidence of non-human technology being salvaged from a USO hidden inside a mothballed warship in Suisun Bay. They know I have it. They are hunting me. I heard your show. You are the only one who might understand. I will be at the payphone at the corner of 3rd and Main in Oakland tomorrow at 10 p.m. If you are real, you will call. He signed it Cerberus, the mythical guardian of the underworld's gate. It felt fitting. He was, after all, the guardian of a graveyard. He hit send, logged off, and immediately left the truck stop, melting back into the anonymous flow of the highway. The next 24 hours were the longest of his life. He lived on coffee and adrenaline, never staying in one place for more than an hour, always watching, always moving. He felt like a ghost himself, haunting the edges of a world he no longer belonged to. At 9:55 p.m. the next night, he stood in the cold, drizzling rain of an Oakland street corner, the designated payphone booth smelling of urine and decay. He felt exposed, foolish. This was a desperate, crazy gamble. Finch was probably just an entertainer. The email was likely buried under thousands of messages from cranks and hoaxers. At exactly 10 p.m., the payphone rang. The sound was so jarring, so loud in the quiet street, that Ben physically jumped. He snatched the receiver, his heart pounding. "Hello?" he rasped. "Is Cerberus there?" The voice on the other end was calm, measured, and instantly recognizable. It was Alistair Finch. "This is him," Ben said, his throat dry. "You took a great risk, Mr. Carter," Finch said. Ben's blood ran cold. He hadn't given his name. "They are very thorough. They have access to systems we can only dream of. The email you sent was a flare in the dark that drew moths you don't want to meet." "How did you know my name?" Ben demanded. "I have my own systems," Finch replied smoothly, "and my own friends, some of whom are very interested in the cargo of the Ghost Fleet. You've stumbled into a very old, very quiet war, a war for technology, for knowledge. Your photos are a bombshell, but a bombshell is useless if it goes off in the wrong place." "What do I do?" Ben asked, the weight of his loneliness and fear pressing down on him. "You trust me," Finch said, "for now. There is a bus station on San Pablo Avenue. Go to locker 37. The code is the year the Kearsarge was commissioned. Inside, you will find a new phone, a key, and an address. Leave your strongbox in the locker. I will have it retrieved. Do it now. We are on a very tight schedule. And, Mr. Carter, welcome to the war." The line went dead. Ben stood in the rain, the dial tone buzzing in his ear. He was no longer just a man on the run. He had an ally. But in stepping into it, he also knew he had just made himself a bigger target.
Ben moved through the sleeping city like a ghost. The paranoia that had gripped him for the last 48 hours was now honed to a fine point, a survival instinct that made him acutely aware of every passing car, every shadow in a darkened doorway. He found the bus station, a grimy, cavernous place smelling of diesel and desperation. The locker was exactly where Finch said it would be. He dialed the 4-digit code, 1943, the year the USS Kearsarge was commissioned. A piece of trivia only a naval history buff or a man obsessed with the fleet would know. The locker clicked open. Inside was a small, heavy-duty Pelican case. He took it, leaving his own metal strongbox containing the precious, terrifying photographs in its place. He closed the locker door, the sound echoing with a sense of finality. He had just traded his only piece of leverage for a blind leap of faith. He didn't open the case until he was in the back of a taxi, heading for the address printed on a small laminated card. Inside the case was a strange, blocky satellite phone, a set of keys, and a thick, sealed envelope containing $5,000 in cash. There was no note, no further instructions, just the tools for a deeper disappearance. The address led him to a run-down industrial area of Oakland, a place of silent warehouses and razor-wire fences. The key was for a service door on the side of a large, anonymous brick building that once housed a commercial laundry. Inside, a single dim bulb illuminated a freight elevator. Following a gut feeling, he used a second, smaller key from the ring on the elevator's control panel. It didn't have a button, but a keyhole marked PH. He turned the key, and the ancient elevator began to groan its way upwards. It opened not into a penthouse, but into a sprawling, unexpectedly modern apartment. The windows were covered with blackout blinds, but the space was filled with the soft glow of dozens of computer monitors and electronic equipment. This was Alistair Finch's nerve center. Finch himself was not what Ben had expected. He wasn't a frantic, wild-eyed conspiracy theorist. The man who rose to greet him from behind a bank of monitors was in his late 60s, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, with calm, intelligent eyes and the composed demeanor of a university professor. His famous voice was even more resonant in person. "Mr. Carter, welcome," Finch said, extending a hand. "Thank you for trusting me. You have no idea how important your contribution is." "I took a hell of a risk," Ben said, his voice raspy. "How do I know I can trust you?" "Because we are on the same side," Finch replied, gesturing to a chair. "The side that believes humanity has a right to know the truth. My team retrieved your package. The photographs are extraordinary. Better than anything we've had in a decade." "So it's real," Ben whispered, the confirmation hitting him with surprising force. "The ship inside the ship, the technology." "Oh, it's very real," Finch said, his face grim. "What you stumbled upon is the crown jewel of a program that has been running in the shadows for over 60 years. They call themselves Majestic, a remnant of the original group tasked by President Truman to handle the retrieval and reverse engineering of non-terrestrial technology.
They operate with no oversight, no accountability, and a budget that doesn't officially exist. Finch turned to one of the monitors, tapping a few keys. A grainy satellite image appeared showing the Suisun Bay fleet. The Kearsarge is their most secure laboratory. They bring artifacts there from other crash sites around the world, primarily USOs. The alien craft inside acts as a kind of Faraday cage, shielding the energy signatures of the technology they're studying from any outside detection. Or so they thought. The divers, they weren't military? Not in the traditional sense, Finch explained. Majestic recruits from the best of the best, special forces, intelligence agencies, but their loyalty is to the program, not to any government. They are the keepers of the secret, and they are utterly ruthless in protecting it. They tried to kill me, Ben said, the reality of the unmarked van hitting him again. They tried to contain you, Finch corrected gently. They don't like loose ends. Your disappearance has already been taken care of. According to official records, Ben Carter, a lonely night watchman, suffered a heart attack, fell off a dock during his patrol, and was tragically lost to the bay. They are very tidy. Ben stared at him, speechless. His entire life, erased with a few keystrokes. He was a ghost now, in every sense of the word. "What do you want from me?" Ben asked finally. "Your knowledge," Finch said, leaning forward, his eyes intense. "You've been closer to their operation than any outsider in living memory. You know the layout, the patterns, the sounds. Your photographs are the proof, but your testimony is the context. You can help us expose them. But you need to understand, Mr. Carter, there is no going back. From this moment on, you live in the shadows. You work with us. You become a part of the war you never knew you were fighting." Finch gestured to the monitors, to the maps, to the streams of encrypted data. "This is the front line. And you, Ben Carter, are our newest soldier."
Ben's new life was a world of shadows and whispers, lived entirely within the confines of the high-tech safe house. Days and nights blurred into a continuous cycle of debriefing and analysis. He was no longer a watchman, he was an intelligence asset. He spent hours with Finch's small dedicated team, a cynical ex-NSA cryptographer named Eva, and a jumpy, brilliant young hacker who went only by Kilo, poring over his grainy photographs and hand-drawn maps of the Ghost Fleet. His memories were their most valuable resource. They had him recount every detail, the specific hum of the alien technology, the exact hue of the blue light, the precise movements of the divers. Kilo built a 3D model of the Kearsarge and its surroundings, using Ben's testimony to pinpoint blind spots in the fleet's primitive security camera system. Eva, meanwhile, worked on the periphery, searching for financial trails, equipment requisitions, and personnel transfers that didn't exist in any official database. Majestic isn't just a program, it's a corporation, Eva explained to Ben one long night, her face illuminated by lines of code on her screen. They have shell companies, proprietary patents based on watered-down alien tech, and slush funds that would make a dictator blush. They're not just hiding secrets, they're profiting from them. Ben, however, felt a growing sense of uselessness. He was a man of action, of the physical world of steel and water. This world of data and shadows was foreign to him. He had provided his story, his proof. Now he was just a ghost in their machine, a living relic whose only purpose was to remember. His chance to contribute more came unexpectedly. Kilo had managed to hack into the fleet's internal server, a dated, barely secured system that managed the dock's lighting and basic gate controls. It was a digital backwater, but it was a foothold. The problem is, their operational network, the one that divers use, is completely separate, Kilo said, pointing to a complex network diagram. It's a closed system, air-gapped,
No physical connection to the outside world. I can't touch it from here. But they have to be communicating somehow, Ben insisted, leaning over the monitor. I saw them. They moved like a team. They knew where to be, when to act. Short range, heavily encrypted comms, Eva chimed in, not looking up from her own work. Probably quantum encrypted, unbreakable. Ben stared at the 3D model of the Kearsarge and its surroundings. He traced the lines of the ship, his mind drifting back to the cold, foggy nights. He remembered the hum, the low, resonant vibration that pulsed through the water. It wasn't random. It had a rhythm, a pattern. The hum, Ben said slowly, it's not just noise from their equipment. It's a signal. Kilo and Eva looked at him, skeptical. A sonic signal through the water and the ship holes? Kilo asked. The data rate would be abysmally slow. You couldn't send complex information that way. It's not about speed, Ben insisted, a flicker of his old marine intuition returning. It's a carrier wave, a machine-to-machine language. I felt it. It pulsed right before they would start or stop their work. Finch, who had been listening silently, stepped forward. A substrate-level data transmission, using the resonant frequency of the fleet's steel hulls as a medium. It's slow, yes, but completely undetectable by conventional means. No radio waves, no satellites, just a vibration in the rust. Brilliant. The team's focus shifted. Ben was no longer just a witness, he was a decoder. Kilo retasked a series of sensitive seismic and acoustic sensors they had secretly placed in the Bay Area, aiming them at the ghost fleet. Working with Ben, they began to isolate the strange hum from the background noise of the bay. Over the next few weeks, they painstakingly translated the vibrations into binary code. It was a slow, agonizing process. But then they had a breakthrough. They managed to decrypt a single, repeating data packet. It wasn't a complex message. It was a simple, automated status report, an inventory list. The list contained designations Ben had never seen: Alpha 7 Containment Unit, Zeta Reticuli Power Core, Bioform Stasis Pod. It was a manifest of the alien cargo still hidden within the USO. And at the bottom of the list was a date and a single chilling instruction. Final Extraction Protocol, Phase 1, Decommissioning of Host Vessel, scheduled for October 31st. They all stared at the screen. Decommissioning. They were going to dismantle the Kearsarge. But what about the alien craft inside? Ben asked. They won't just scrap it, Finch said, his voice grim. They'll move it to a new, more secure location, a black site deep underground. If that happens, we lose it forever. All this technology, all this proof will be buried for another 60 years. The date was less than a month away. Their quiet war of intelligence gathering was over. The clock was ticking. They had to act. The decrypted message changed everything. The quiet academic atmosphere of the safe house was replaced by the low hum of frantic, desperate planning. The digital clock on Finch's main monitor, counting down the days to October 31st, became a constant, oppressive presence. They'll use the decommissioning as a cover, Finch stated, pacing in front of a large digital map of the bay. They'll bring in a huge salvage crew, barges, heavy equipment. Under the chaos of dismantling a 45,000-ton aircraft carrier, moving a much smaller, 30-ton alien craft will be almost invisible. So we can't stop them head-on, Eva said, her fingers flying across a keyboard. Majestic will have their best security teams on site, armed and with shoot-on-sight orders. We'd be walking into a massacre. A direct assault is suicide, Finch agreed, and a media leak is too slow. By the time anyone took the story seriously, the craft would be 1,000 feet underground in a Nevada salt mine. We only have one option. We have to intercept the cargo during the transfer. The plan they formulated was audacious, bordering on insane. It wasn't a plan of brute force, but of misdirection and digital warfare, a devil's gambit. Ben was central to the first phase. The divers will have a schedule, a manifest, Ben reasoned, pointing to his own hand-drawn map of the Kearsarge's hidden access point. They're methodical. They won't just yank the whole ship out. They'll remove the remaining artifacts first. We need to know what they're taking and when. Using the acoustic signal as their guide, the team focused all their efforts on cracking the deeper layers of Majestic's closed network. It was Ben's intuition that provided the key. He remembered the divers' movements, the specific light patterns their tools emitted. He realized they were using a form of optical communication as a secondary data layer, a silent, light-based handshake between their devices. By cross-referencing the timing of the light pulses with the acoustic hum, Kilo found a vulnerability, a tiny, momentary flaw in the encryption. It was enough. They couldn't read the whole data stream, but they could inject their own, and that's all they needed. Phase 2 was Kilo's domain. He would use the flaw to insert a ghost into Majestic's inventory system. He would create a false artifact, a piece of phantom cargo with the highest priority designation. This phantom would be scheduled for immediate, separate transport on the first night of the decommissioning. They'll have to use a smaller, faster transport for a priority 1 item, Kilo explained, his eyes wide open with a mixture of terror and excitement. A single truck, maybe a helicopter. It's our only chance to isolate a piece of their operation. Phase 3 was the physical part, the most dangerous part. They needed to hijack that transport. Finch revealed that his network of friends included more than just hackers and analysts. He had a small, deniable team of former special operators, men and women who, like Ben, had been burned by the official world and now lived in its shadows. Ben's role was unexpected. He wouldn't be in the safe house. He would be on the water. "You are the only one who can navigate that boneyard in the dark without instruments," Finch told him, his expression serious. "Our team needs a pilot, someone to get them in and out unseen. You will guide them to the rendezvous point." The plan was set. On the night of October 30th, the eve of the decommissioning, Kilo would inject the ghost signal. The Majestic team, following their flawless protocols, would dispatch a small team to retrieve the phantom artifact. Finch's team, guided by Ben, would be lying in wait. They would intercept the transport, not to steal the alien technology, but to swap it. Finch held up a small metallic object, identical in size and shape to one of the smaller power cells Ben had seen in his photographs. "This is a tracker, but it's more than that. It's also a high-powered data transmitter. Our goal isn't to capture their technology. It's to find out where they're taking it. We swap their artifact with this one. They unknowingly take our Trojan horse right into the heart of their operation. We lose the battle for one small artifact, but we win the war by exposing their most secret base."
The night of October 30th was cold and moonless, the sky over Suisun Bay obscured by a low, thick layer of clouds. It was perfect. Ben stood at the helm of a sleek, matte black, rigid inflatable boat, its powerful engines muffled to a near-silent hum. He was dressed in dark tactical gear, the unfamiliar weight of a communications headset pressing against his ear. Beside him sat 2 of Finch's operators, their faces grim and unreadable, their movements economical and precise. They were ghosts, ready to hunt. "Kilo, are you in?" The voice in his ear was Finch's, calm and steady from the command center. "I'm in," came Kilo's tense reply. "Injecting the ghost signal now. Sending a priority 1 flag for an unstable energy cell. They should bite." Ben navigated the boat away from the hidden dock and into the main channel, his hand steady on the wheel. He felt a strange sense of homecoming. The fear was still there, a cold knot in his stomach, but it was overshadowed by a profound sense of purpose. He was no longer a passive observer. He was a participant. He was taking the fight back to the shadows that had haunted him. He guided the boat into the labyrinth of the ghost fleet, killing the engines and switching to silent electric propulsion. He knew these channels better than the lines on his own hand. Gliding the craft through the black water, passing between the towering, silent hulls without a single light. "We have a reaction," Eva's voice cut through the silence. "They've dispatched a retrieval team, a single fast-response watercraft, just like we predicted.
They're heading for the Kearsarge. "We're in position," Ben whispered into his mic, maneuvering the boat into the deep shadow of a listing cargo ship, a perfect ambush point overlooking the approach to the carrier. The wait was agonizing. The only sounds were the gentle lapping of water and the distant cry of a gull. Minutes later they saw it, a sleek black craft, almost identical to their own, cut through the water with silent, deadly speed. It carried 3 of the majestic divers. It docked at the base of the Kearsarge, and 2 of the divers disappeared into the hidden seam in the hull. They emerged less than 5 minutes later, carrying a small, heavily insulated container that glowed with a faint internal blue light. The unstable energy cell. Kilo's Phantom. "They've taken the bait," Finch confirmed. "They're moving to the designated extraction point, a disused loading dock on the north shore. Ben, it's on you now. Get the team there, stay in their wake, but stay out of sight." Ben engaged the engines, the boat surging forward. He began to shadow the majestic craft, using the massive decaying ships as cover, a deadly game of cat and mouse in the steel graveyard. The majestic team was fast, but Ben was smarter. He knew every shortcut, every submerged obstacle. He kept them perfectly in sight while remaining a ghost in their wake. They reached the North Shore dock, a decrepit wooden pier shrouded in fog. The majestic craft docked, and one of the divers got out, carrying the glowing container towards a waiting unmarked black truck. "Now," Finch commanded. Ben's boat slid silently towards the pier. The 2 operators with him moved with astonishing speed. One of them aimed a strange cylindrical rifle, and a soft hiss cut through the night. The diver on the pier slumped to the ground, not dead, but unconscious, felled by a sophisticated tranquilizer dart. The 2 divers remaining on the boat were neutralized just as quickly. The team was on the pier in seconds. One operator stood guard, while the other sprinted to the container. He worked with practiced efficiency, his fingers flying over the container's locking mechanism. He opened it, revealing a small, cylindrical object pulsing with an eerie blue light. He carefully lifted it out and replaced it with the Trojan horse device Finch had given them, an identical-looking cylinder. He closed and resealed the container. The entire operation, from the first tranquilizer dart to the final seal, took less than 30 seconds. The packages swapped, the operator reported into his comms. "We are clear." They were back in Ben's boat and vanishing into the fog before the majestic team could have even registered what had happened. As they sped away, they saw the diver on the pier begin to stir. He would wake up with a headache and a memory of a shadow, nothing more. He would complete his mission, delivering the Trojan horse right into the hands of his superiors. Back in the safety of the hidden dock, Finch's voice came over the comms, filled with a triumphant awe. "The tracker is active. They're moving. We have them. My God, Ben, we have them." Ben leaned against the helm, his body trembling with the adrenaline crash. He had faced the monster in its lair and emerged from the darkness. He had helped plant a seed of truth in the heart of the deepest conspiracy on Earth. The war was not over, but for the first time, a light had been lit in the shadows. The days and weeks following the audacious swap at the pier were a blur of intense activity for Ben. The safe house became a command center for an unseen war. The Trojan horse, meticulously planted inside Majestic's priority cargo, began to transmit data. It was a slow trickle at first, then a steady stream, revealing a network of black sites, underground facilities, and hidden laboratories scattered across the globe. The most significant signal came from a remote, heavily fortified complex deep beneath the Nevada desert, their primary research facility, the true heart of Majestic. The data included energy signatures, personnel movements, and, most crucially, a constant low-level energy reading that indicated the presence of the main alien craft, now relocated from the Kearsarge. Finch's team had found the Leviathan's true lair. "This is it, Ben," Finch said, pointing to a holographic projection of the Nevada facility. "This is what we've been fighting for. Proof. Undeniable, irrefutable proof of non-terrestrial technology, reverse engineering programs, and a shadow government operating beyond any human law." Ben felt a profound sense of vindication. His lonely nights, his desperate flight, his terrifying gamble, it had all led to this. He had not only seen the secret, he had helped expose it. But exposing it was the next, far more dangerous step. Majestic was too powerful, too embedded. They would crush any leak, label it disinformation, and hunt down the sources with ruthless efficiency. They needed a strategic strike, a way to make the truth undeniable, to make it stick. Finch and his team carefully packaged the data, creating a multi-layered, self-propagating information bomb. They targeted key journalists known for their integrity, independent research institutions, and even a few sympathetic figures within various government agencies who operated with a lingering sense of duty, untouched by Majestic's pervasive influence. The release was meticulously timed, designed to overwhelm Majestic's damage control before they could effectively respond. The day the data went live, the world barely noticed it first. It began with whispers on obscure forums, then a few skeptical articles in fringe publications. But then Finch's data bombs detonated in quick succession. High-resolution satellite images of the Nevada facility, detailed schematics of alien artifacts, encrypted communications logs, and even internal Majestic documents confirming the existence of the Extraterrestrial Technological Integration Program. The floodgates opened. The mainstream media, initially dismissive, was forced to take notice. Government scrambled for answers. Majestic, accustomed to operating in impenetrable darkness, found itself suddenly blinking in the harsh glare of global scrutiny. They tried to deny, to obfuscate, to discredit, but the evidence was too vast, too consistent. The truth, once a carefully guarded secret, was now a public spectacle. The cargo of the Ghost Fleet became the central piece of a global phenomenon. Hearings were convened, agencies were investigated. The shadowy figures of Majestic forced into the light began to unravel. It would be a long, messy, and violent fight, but the first decisive blow had been struck. Ben watched it all unfold from the safe house, a silent observer once more. He saw the news reports, the outraged politicians, the bewildered public. He saw the world grappling with a truth it was wholly unprepared for. He felt no triumph, only a quiet, weary satisfaction. The ships in Suisun Bay were no longer just ghosts. They were monuments to a secret unveiled. His work was not over. Finch's network, now more powerful and more visible than ever, had a new mission: to continue exposing Majestic, to ensure the truth remained in the light, and to prepare humanity for the implications of what they had discovered. Ben, the unassuming night watchman, remained a vital part of that network. He was the living link, the man who had seen it all, from the first mysterious hum to the global awakening. He never returned to his old life, to his small house, or the quiet comfort of the Ghost Fleet. Ben Carter, the watchman, was officially dead. But the man who emerged from the shadows was more alive than he had ever been. He was a guardian of a different kind now, not watching over rusty ships, but over the unfolding destiny of humanity. He had looked into the abyss, and instead of falling, had helped bring a piece of the cosmos back into the light. The unseen war would continue, but now the world knew it was being fought.